Hi everyone. Again, we just had introductions, so I'm just going to jump right in. Um, so our goal for this, so obviously it says in front, streamlining green infrastructure retrofits. Um, right. So our goal for this was we consulted other retrofit manuals and considered items in those manuals, and we pared down the options to the most cost-effective, municipal-friendly um, implementations that we could. Um, this all started by reviewing the Boston Public Works suite of details. Um, that was kind of the foundation for our exercise, was to review these and see which ones we could utilize in Canton, Nord, and other similar suburban type communities. Um, so the first step from this was to create. So we reviewed the city of Boston standard details. We met with Canton and Norwood. Norwood, we had some internal stormwater details that we have at our firm that we also utilized. And then we looked at the stormwater handbook. We looked at the green infrastructure design handbook issued by Boston Water and Sewer Commission. And we reviewed the the New England Stormwater Retrofit Manual. Um, and from these individual manuals, we kind of chose what we thought would be the most applicable for suburban um, municipalities to utilize these, and not only to utilize the details, but to provide a map or an outline or a guide into implementing them. So the first step of this process was to create a matrix of all of the options, all our details. Um, so we have up top, so the Boston Public Works details, they're extensive. There's a lot of them, which is great. It was overwhelming, to be honest, and a lot of them, I basically could break them down into accessories for the BMPs and then the actual treatment um, portions of them. So these upper portions here, these upper areas here are all from the public works we reviewed. You'll notice here that up at the top we have certain rubrics that we weighed when considering each of these. Now I'm going to change my screen for a minute, but we essentially broke them down into five categories. The size and area required for a BMP, we weighted at 10%. Vehicular and pedestrian safety, we weighted at 15%. Constructability, 20%. Cost of construction, 25%. And the maintenance effort at 30%. Um, as many people know, a stormwater BMP that is not maintained essentially stops becoming a stormwater BMP at some point. In general, one is bad, five is the most. So one is the least area, least dangerous, least difficult to construct, the most expensive, and the least maintenance effort, whereas five is the opposite end of that. More area required, it's more dangerous, it's the most difficult to construct, it's most expensive, and the most maintenance. These, we ranked them one through five. Um, you know, Size was based on, essentially, it started out with a wider rubric, but eventually we settled on that, considering this was going to be for public implementations in the right of way, we figured that space was going to be at a premium. So anything over 1,000 square feet might not be realistic. Um, Same with vehicular pedestrian safety, something very safe that's essentially invisible, all the way down to something with standing water in it, steeper slopes, tripping and fall hazards. Um, the constructability, again, easily to construct by any site contractor as a one versus a five, which is severe constraints requiring trained installers, intensive oversight. Um, and then everything in the middle, noticeable site constraints, whether there's utilities, groundwater, um, inappropriate soils that can make constructability a little more moderate. Construction costs, again, less than 1,000 to over, you know, less than $1,000 for like a small sediment forebay, whereas um, a subsurface infiltration system will run you, even a small one, more than $20,000. And then maintenance effort, very low effort items like curbs, grates, those don't require any effort. Um, Requiring complex tasks, media replacement, confined spaces, proprietary components. There's a lot of maintenance in that. And with that comes cost, long-term cost. So with the rubric established and the details that we wanted to evaluate there, um, I worked my way through and provided rankings for each of these based on each of them, right? And at the end, all of it is weighted, and a suitability quote suitability was established. Um, the It says feasibility, but the suitability of the site, anything between a one and a three, um, is pretty feasible. Anything between a three and a four is somewhat feasible, and then when you get to four and five, it becomes less feasible. Um, you could see, some of the reds, a green roof. It was in the stormwater handbook. I included it in our analysis as a green infrastructure. But as far as practicality of for what we were doing, it immediately kind of got pushed off the table. Things like porous pavement, porous concrete, these have high maintenance efforts, high costs initially. They're great for reducing um, impervious surface, you know, and they're safe. But the space that's required, the costs, constructability, it has to be constructed just so. But all of the accessories ended up being, and this is no surprise, the accessories are like inlets, curb inlets, granite, cobble, paver splash pads, beehive grates. There's almost no maintenance, and the cost is kind of just sticking it in the ground. Same with the size. Um, and then you have the ones kind of in the middle, which are the oranges, the bioretention areas, the infiltration basins and detention basins, rain gardens. Um, these two here, they're alternate layouts for subdivisions, like rather than the traditional catch basin and drain manhole construction, it would be more like sheet flowing to the sides into water quality swales. Again, that would take a significant effort on like the side of like regulations and such, but we included it in this analysis. And so with all of this, I issued it to the towns. Their input was crucial through all this. So Canton got this, Norwood got this, Neponset River, and I issued the first set of details based on this. Um, so we created the matrix. So what did we learn from this matrix? What we learned from is that the Public Works in Boston. There's a lot of hardware associated with these BMPs. There's a lot of granite curbs, a lot of porous pavement, both rubber and asphalt. There's a lot of c concrete weirs, um, rain gardens entirely surrounded by concrete, rain gardens with very specific soil requirements, all of which we found we thought that would deter suburban municipalities from installing, both because they're expensive, lack of funds, both because the maintenance um, tends to be too much, both knowledge-wise and like manpower-wise. And I'd say knowledge-wise, in that, it would take a specialist to replace the soil media or whatever for them. Um, so from these rankings, like I said, I issued this matrix and the first set of our details to everyone. They had a week to review. They provided comments. Um, we also met and we tweaked, um, how much each of these would weigh per the per each town, and eventually, which was what was great, is that no both Norwood and Canton, everybody worked really well together. So this was really like a crowdsourcing. It was two municipalities coming together and both with the same goal in mind, which is, overall a great thing and what you really like to see. So with their input, we tweaked these as best we could. Like I think at one point we brought the maintenance effort up and the space down and tweaked constructability from 25 to 20 and this and that. But we ended up with a matrix that we were comfortable with and that we could proceed forward um, with. So once I received their feedback, we scheduled site visits. There were four scheduled site visits. We ended up at three of them because we ended up spending a good amount of time at one of them because we thought it was an excellent example um, for impervious reduction. Um, and what we learned from the site visits is that impervious reduction should be, and we all agreed that impervious reduction should really be the first step in many of these municipal projects. Um, Again, there are areas, and what we found was that it's pretty obvious areas that need reduction and areas that don't. There are we were out on our first site and it was kind of immediate when we got out there that it was a wide road. I want to say it was a 32-foot road. And later when I got back into the office, I went on Earth and the radius, the edge of pavement radius for this intersection was 50 feet. So you could drive a tractor trailer down this road and it's a simple residential road and it kind of screamed out at us. One, because reduction of impervious area is cheap, right? Like you're literally spending less on asphalt and thereby creating a more pervious area. Um, so um, so from that site visit, I again was able to tweak our details and essentially provide the first step in the evaluation to be impervious reduction. So these are the final suite of details that we came up with. Excuse me. These are the final suite of details that we came up with. Um, we have a general, excuse me. So we have a general pre-treatment BMP showing a small sediment forebay, mini forebay, a stone diaphragm, and a stone check dam. These are these can be implemented in a lot of the low impact design stormwater solutions that we um, propose in these. The first section of these details is impervious reduction. As I said, it's kind of the first step that we go for because we believe it's the easiest. This is the cul-de-sac island. Pretty common. A lot of cul-de-sacs can be oversized. If there's opportunity, with an existing pavement width over 50 feet, um, assuming that emergency vehicles, stuff like that, there would be a process to this considering the fire department and such, but assuming emergency vehicles can circulate, putting a landscaped island in the middle of a cul-de-sac is a great way to, at the very least, reduce impervious area. And if it can be graded as such in like a bowl in that kind of way, and there isn't significant utility um, conflicts like a sewer manhole right in the middle, then there's an opportunity to provide some recharge. Um, all the details call that any area of pavement that gets converted to green space will need to scarify, scratch the bottom of the hole to promote infiltration. It's probably been pretty compacted considering it's pavement, so that kind of, those kind of notes are on there to scarify. But it would be basically scratching the surface, putting loam in some kind of drought resistant seed down is basically what, and I don't have the seed mix chosen yet. I'm gonna talk to our LA group, but a good like hardy grass that can be mowed, as opposed to more expensive things like mulch and plantings. This is the kind of area, kind of thing that we want the DPW to be able to go out there and mow it in a half an hour and then be done with it. Um, that being said, we do call for the material, the loam to be sandy loam, but that's one of our details. This other detail is a narrowing of the roadway. This essentially came from our site visit. This was like essentially exactly what was happening out there, in that we had an existing roadway that was over 30 feet, and we were looking at it, and there was a catch basin, and you could just bring the whole thing in and then provide little swales that go to the existing catch basins, or you could just have it be landscape, and if there's curbing, slide it out and just veer the curbing in to the catch basins. Um, at the intersections, if you take we discussed that we think, according to the fire code, it's 25 feet, but we felt 30 feet was an appropriate radius for right of ways. But if you take a 50-foot radius and then you extend it out to 25 feet, you're gaining 400 square feet of green space. And if you did it at all four, you're looking at 1,600, square feet, excuse me, yes, square feet of green space at an intersection. And you've used less pavement, and, you know, and even if you just left it as grass, but we have options at each of these, whether it's a radius reduction with no curb or catch basin, or if there's a catch basin and a curb, or a catch basin and no curb, or a curb and no catch basin. Um, so that is reducing pavement in that way. One of the we were we looked at several pervious pavers, and this was um, this was one that was most interested. It's a little more affordable it's a little more utilitarian in that like you can park overflow for parks, trailheads, that kind of stuff. It can certainly be utilized in those applications. This is a crosswalk bulb with a potential either a mini sediment forebay with a infiltration trench underneath it, or other BMPs. You could plant a tree. Um, this actually what we're showing here is, and this is one of the details that we got. This was taken from another municipality, but it's basically a municipal tree. It's a tree box filter, but the municipality redid it so it's kind of their own. I believe it was Franklin. And it takes something that's a third party, very expensive piece of equipment and essentially has all of the parts in it, but it utilizes everyday items. In this case, a 48-inch section of pipe. Um, you turn the pipe upside down with the bell at the bottom, crushed stone at the bottom, fill the bottom part with crushed stone, a planting media that meets this. Essentially it's a sandy loam. It has heavy sand with some topsoil and organics in there. But providing that, it's a street it excuse me, it has streetscape c- characteristics as well as filtrating characteristics. Um, so we thought that was an excellent one to include. Um, this is a roadside swale, 3 feet wide. Again, kind of modeled after what is going on up here, just more in detail. The idea of you saw cut the pavement at 3 feet or however much you can, and then you just put a little swale on the side of the road. The stone check dams are shown if the soil on site happens to be poor, you could put some stone check dams on there to extend the hydraulic connection and extend the time in which it flows in the swale, promote infiltration as best you can, and also allow for sediment to settle before it enters either the existing catch basin or before it moves downstream. Um, this is a pocket rain garden. Again, same idea in that you have the old pavement line, the new pavement line, and you have this green 400 square feet of green space. This is simply a 6-inch um, depression with drought resistant grass, and this one is shown with mini sediment forebays at each side. But you could put a stone diaphragm, or if the project only permits very minimal, you could just have it sheet flow without curbing, have everything just sheet flow into this depression and infiltrate, um, providing breaks in the curb if required. This is the catch basin retrofit trench. This is included in the New England Stormwater retrofit manual. I believe Arlington is one of the first ones that did this, but it's an excellent retrofit option. You have a catch basin at the top of the drainage drain, and if you have capacity issues downstream, if this catch basin gets a ton of sediment in it, it allows for an alleviation of the downstream flow and also promotes infiltration. Um, you set this trench 3 inches lower at minimum than the existing outlet pipe, and water comes back into here, infiltrates. Um, and then the next one that we came up with that in the spirit of this, I kind of had this idea. Many of you know that with the new updated MS4 permit, there's going to be a priority on existing catch basins, and if they're MS4 compliant, meaning they have to be have a 4-inch sump and they have to be offline. And as many of you know, the catch basin to catch basin kind of connection, it's pretty prominent. It's you see it a lot. So under given circumstances, you could provide a trench between those. Um, it's the same idea. We have notes down here about, the catch basins shouldn't have a pipe with an excessive slope. But if you have two catch basins 100 feet apart and they only drop, 5, 6 inches between them, it's an ideal um, idea in order to bring because the draft of the permit says that you either need to replace all non-conforming catch basins or you need to put some kind of treatment downstream of existing non-conforming. So under that guise, um, we thought this was a good idea, you know, to essentially, you know, saw cut, remove the pipe and put in a new um, perforated pipe. It'll have pitch on it, but the idea is at the end of it, if you kind of put an overflow T with the opening on the top, you could promote as much recharge as you could, and then eventually for high storms, it would come out over the top down in the catch basin and then move on its way down. That's the reason for and then if anything gets caught in there, you can open up the bottom T and clean it out. The idea of having the opening on the top was to promote as much infiltration. It acts as an overflow weir, essentially, to promote infiltration. One of our last ones is a arched subsurface Caltech chambers. Um, in scenarios where you have um, flooding issues, if there's downstream capacity issues, and there aren't a lot of subsurface utilities, an off-stream infiltration basin certainly is applicable. Um, Again, it is one of those situations where it would be like if the site allowed it. Um, the second one is just more more notes for that. And our final detail is a dry well that has a sump. This is kind of a last case, worst case scenario in that there's high utility presence all around the catch basin, so there's no opportunity for an infiltration trench. Um, you have high sediments in there, but you also have some kind of downstream capacity issues. So this can help alleviate that. You wrap the leaching section in Marafi fabric. The sediment sump would need to get cleaned out when needed, but it provides a little bit of a sump and the infiltrating through the Marafi paper as the least amount of treatment that you can possibly get, but it is something. Um, so those are the details that we put together. We also, as part of this process, I wanted a way at the beginning. It's important for the streamline of this. It's important to get out in front of the project. I asked I spoke to DPW, some members of the DPW, and they say for certain municipalities, and they say that the lead time between construction and when they first know about the road and construction can be around February, at least the ones that I spoke to, and then they would start to bid March and April, and then they start to construct over the summer. Is a loose timeline, which means you have um, about a month or two between here's the name of the street and here's what the budget's going to be to kind of get the wheels going and try to learn as much as you can. And preparation is you know, spending time. It's like when you're doing a soil evaluation or something, spend a half hour at your desk to look at the field stuff and it to look at the office online stuff, and it'll make your field work easier. And that was the idea when we came up with this. This is 40 questions, and I'll just go through it real quick, but project name and location, what project type, um, when is the project likely to break ground? Is this going to be at the beginning of the summer? Is this at the end of the summer, late fall, that kind of thing. Is there available surface area? Is there opportunity to reduce impervious? Are there sidewalks on both sides of the street? Can one of them be removed? Is the road a cul-de-sac? Can a landscape island be placed at the center? These are just, again, you can see where these questions came from what I just showed you. It's kind of like, I didn't want to show you this first, and then, so anyway, is there excessive intersection radii? Can the radii be reduced? And then you give this little where if you go on Google Maps, you could look at, the existing radius, the minimum to be 30, and it kind of gives you an idea of, how you're changing the radius of the turn. Is there excessive pavement width? What's the existing pavement width? The potential green space on each side is a simple, like whatever the pavement width is minus the 24 foot as the minimum width divide by two, and that kind of gives you potential green space. Um, then you kind of go down to the site hydraulic properties, so you would have to go onto this website. It's an actual link here, but you type um, the address, and you can find out the name of the soil, if it's an A, a B, a C, or a D. Is infiltration feasible? Um, for this exercise, we considered A and B soils appropriate for infiltration. While there are C soils, as you know, there are C soils that can infiltrate. There are sea soils that are like concrete that don't do anything. It varies. And for again, this being municipal streamlined work, the idea of, oh well, will it drain? Won't it drain? It's just for the most part, a B layer is pretty solid for infiltration. So that's kind of where we drew the line at A and B, C and D. Um, Is infiltration feasible? That kind of stemmed from the question before it. Um, have record plans been reviewed for utilities? Is there evidence of high groundwater? Are there sumps in the nearby basements? Um, plus, the guys who work for DPW usually know a lot about the town too. Sometimes they just know, oh, the catch basins have water in them all the time because of high groundwater. And um, is the area prone, prone to flooding? Um, if there's a flood study, consult that, check the floodplain. Um, and then is subsurface storage possible? Considering all of this, is subsurface storage possible? Existing infrastructure, is the project affecting infrastructure already? By just doing this, are we affecting infrastructure? Are there significant conflicts? Again, you can check them off here. Um, so after I had this project, so all depending on the municipality, this question will change. For Canton and for Norwood, they pretty much do flow to impaired waters. But again, we have the link to where they are, and it seems important to note for projects what it is. The idea being, even if at the end of all this you fill this sheet out and it's like, you know what, we have razor thin budget on this, we can't do anything. This should be kept as like almost like a log, or for historical is not the right word, but just for the records. So when they when they look back on it in a couple of years, are like, oh, hey, we happen to install like a 4 bay here. Like, why did we do that? It has standing water, or you can kind of go back and look at the decision process um, retroactively. So, all depending on the municipality, you would check this and you would find out what impaired water it goes to. Um, are there existing catch basins in the street? Are they non-conforming? They must be offline with 4-foot sumps. Is a CB retrofit an option, considering existing utilities, soils, and such? If not, a dry well with a sump. Um, are there system capacity issues downstream? Are there existing street trees? Is there opportunity to plant street trees? Have you spoken to local residents? Is there support for impervious reduction and or BMPs in the area? Are there any physical constraints that cannot be overcome, such as space, topography, poor soil, setbacks to structures, existing vegetation, established trees, old oaks, stuff like that? But you don't want to mess around with that, because at that point you're cutting off your nose and spite your face. You don't want to cut down trees to make a rain garden when that tree was probably drinking more water than so. And then at the end here, just a couple things I threw at the end, considering cost. What's the cost of the project with no additional BMPs considered? What's this going to cost if you didn't have this guide? What's the cost? What cost, if any, will be saved by reducing the impervious cover? And then can this money be used for other things, whether it be mulch and seed or just grass, you know, which would be seed, obviously. Um, so yep, that is the extent of the municipal project setup sheet, to kind of learn about the site before you get there, and that way you're not surprised by anything. Um, um, yeah, so all this is it's important, to get out in front of the project, to make it as easy as possible. It makes it easy as possible. Um, to know the site prior to the work, the soils and elevations, um, all of that can be answered with this, and we think it's a very good tool. Um, with this, with these answered and fresh in your mind, and you can have it in your hand, you need to know your options from there, right? So this is a little decision tree that I put together, that we put together, um, that has some of these questions up here. This is more in depth. I couldn't get all these questions on here, but this is like the major items that that lead to each one of our items. Um, it all start, is there green space, right? So we'll go down this, is there green space? No, there's no green space. Okay. Can pavement or right of way be reduced? If it can, come over here, check all that apply. Is this a excessive intersection radii? If it is, you want to reduce your radius. All of these essentially lead to, are there well-drained soils? So if it's an oversized cul-de-sac, you'd proceed this way to cul-de-sac island, and then um, are there well-draining soils, H, A, and B, in the footprint of the project? Um, if the right-of-way can't be reduced, then is there sufficient room underground for storage, considering utilities? Um, if there is, then it brings you back to the soil types, right? If there's good soil. Um, what's important to note on this is that the answers are color coded. So if you come up here and you choose no, you're now in the color of magenta. So you stay with magenta through. So is there sufficient underground storage? Would be yes. Are the soils well draining? Yes. Then subsurface chambers are probably your best option if available. If they aren't great, then you can say, is streetscape a factor? If it's not, you can use a dry well with a sump. If it is, um, whether or not you want to use a permeable pavers at that point, can be permeable pavers or an infiltration swale with stone check dams. If the soils aren't great, those are more shallow BMPs. Um, or if there's green space, yes. If the soils are good, yes. And now you're back down to here. You have the cul-de-sac rain garden, like pocket rain garden, that you get from radius reduction, the crosswalk bulb, which you would use for cul-de-sac island, or the infiltration swale for narrowing a roadway width. Um, and then way over here, this is more, there's no room for subsurface storage. Um, there's no green space. You can't reduce pavement width, and there's no room for storage. Now you're over here with catch basins. Are the catch basins in the project street? If there aren't, then maybe a municipal tree well filter for a smaller drainage area could be considered. Um, if there are catch basins, if they are compliant, you're over here, and then it just asks you if there are downstream capacity issues. If you can't store anything, you can't reduce the impervious, there isn't good soils, and there are no downstream capacity issues, then you kind of need to just reevaluate, maybe, you know, plant a tree, or it ended at reevaluate or combine BMPs. I'm trying to find something applicable to put there, but um, if they are non-compliant, then you have again there's no sump retrofit. If they're not offline, you could potentially do the second retrofit, which is the two daisy chained catch basins together. And if there are downstream capacity issues, it brings you right back over here to this. Um, so that is the decision tree as far as trying to take these questions and putting them down here. Um, and our final de de deliverable, excuse me, is a principles guide, implementation guide. Um, it's a little narrative, kind of explaining what the intent of this is, to kind of summarize more what I've been saying out loud into words. We introduce the idea with an introduction. We provide the goals and objectives, um, quantitative goals as far as like what we're actually trying to accomplish, how to use the guide, um, who's intended to use it, um, and essentially like the guiding principles for low impact development. They get pretty much boiled down to, one, minimize impervious surfaces where practical. It's the cheapest way to get stormwater, reduce stormwater, promote infiltration. Um, Two is to utilize existing municipal lands, right of ways, so if there are any parcels or municipal lands that are underutilized and you think that this tree or this checklist can be applied to it in order to put together some kind of stormwater BMP, um, we would encourage that. Number three, and this is might be moved up to number one, but the integrating these LIDs into routine capital and capital projects. That's what we really wanted to do was at the beginning of all this, when you learn what the street is, can we learn about this? Can we, if there are, you know, interns or whatever working at the town, can we hand them this and be like, hey, we're paving Granite Street in the summer. Go find out everything on this, and here's everything. You know, Trying to get ahead of it is important because municipalities, a lot of it, timing is everything. Things have to be on the budget well in advance, and they don't like surprises. So when integrating this early is, to me, is key. Prioritizing number four, prioritizing simple and maintainable solutions. Again, drought resistant grasses, mini sediment forebays, vegetated filter strips. These are simple but effective solutions, and again, can be implemented just by reducing impervious area. Um, Providing pretreatment wherever possible. Um, Enhancing the community and environmental benefits, excuse me. Improving streetscapes and aesthetics, heat island reduction, tree canopy expansion. Um, in some cases, traffic calming by narrowing the roadways. Um, Habitat enhancements depending on the rain garden location. Um, all of this is to focus on watershed priorities, both within the Neponset River and, the state of Massachusetts, just in general. Stormwater standards. There are new stormwater regulations in draft form. There's a new MS4 in draft form. So these priorities within the watershed were something we wanted to highlight with this project. 8, make sure to match the BMP with the site. No single BMP is appropriate for every location. Usually a site visit is great. Again, when we went out there, it really, you, you get a group of people together and you start talking, and it's a crowdsourcing kind of thing, especially if you all have the same intent. You can really get a lot done. So we'd encourage site visit and to utilize this checklist. Preserve and promote infiltration via reduction of impervious surfaces, providing infiltration swales or rain gardens where possible, landscaped islands at the very least where not, plant trees if you can. And then number 10 is kind of an overall, just improving stormwater quality. Municipal projects should seek to incorporate some form of stormwater quality, even if it's a reduction of impervious. Every little bit helps for a whole watershed, and if you keep narrowing roadways, before you know it, 5 or 10 years, we've reduced it by a certain number of acres or a certain number of whatever. And ultimately that's the goal and that's just by doing a little bit of prep before and implementing some relatively minor changes. Um, and I believe that summarizes everything that we have done. Um, if there's anything I'm forgetting, Ann or Anna or any of the folks that helped me, um, Josh and Christine at Canton, Ilex, and Norwood, I really appreciate all your input, and the same with Anna. This was a collaborative effort, and we're pretty proud of what we put together. So thank you. Um, I'll be free to answer any questions, or we can just talk or discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before we go to questions, Anna, was there anything, we got a little discombobulated at the beginning. Was there anything you wanted to add, Anna?
Apologies. Thank you everyone for putting up with my technical difficulties. And thank you, Steve, so much for presenting all of the work that you've done. We're so happy. I wanted to just sort of summarize. I think that when we applied for this grant initially, our thought was that there are sort of two problems with a very bespoke green infrastructure approach, and that it's both expensive, right? If you're creating individual designs for every site, and it is not very replicable. And really, what we were hoping to do is help integrate green infrastructure into a very standard process. And so right of way makes a ton of sense. And this is somewhat inspired by Kate England's work at the Boston Office of Green Infrastructure, which is where we started with some of those standard details, just trying to make sure that when we have the opportunity through sort of like ongoing planned right of way work, we can just sort of plug and play and use both the standard details and the decision tree that Steve laid out so wonderfully to sort of think through both what makes the most sense for this site and then also like, do we already have a design ready to go? And the nice thing about standard designs, right, is the more that you build, the easier it gets to maintain those and everyone gets more comfortable with the process. And I would love to ask either Canton or Norwood if they have any insight into sort of like particular opportunities and challenges within the towns. I think that when we went through this whole process, it was really good to sit down and sort of learn, right? Like what features are we willing to maintain? What do we think is reasonable? Sort of thinking through for each town, like what sort of streets do you have? What areas do you think are going to be common in terms of places where you can look for opportunities, especially when we went on our site visit, realizing that we had so much extra space potentially that we could depave was a real opened a lot of good discussion. So, and then if anyone has any questions, we have some time to discuss.
Hi, yeah, Christine with the town of Canton. So, yeah, what we are starting to hopefully implement moving forward is definitely pavement reduction at the corner roundings. Steve mentioned timelines, like when you get the list of streets that are going to be paved. It's a sh rather short timeline. So reducing the radii is something that you could potentially easily do through available mapping such as LiDAR, Mass GIS and, other resources. So there's not a lot of design incorporated with that. And if you wanted to reduce the rounding, plant grass, you could always come back at a later date and do something with a curb inlet, rain garden, swale, depending on the slope of the road or, so there's always the option to reduce the pavement, plant the grass, and come back at a later date if necessary. Um, what we're also trying to do is we have a couple projects where we are reducing the corner rounding. So, Josh will go out and paint the new radius or put cones up to get the neighborhood kind of in line with that idea and, to get them used to the idea. Something like a cul-de-sac with an island installation, we might have to go to the neighbors directly affected by that because that's kind of, you're taking away their basketball court or, they use that pavement. So there would be more public involvement. But yeah, and other projects that would, like the subsurface catch basin retrofits, I think talking to my supervisor, we grade the roads, so we know, which ones will be paved in the near future. So probably like a more detailed installation like catch basin retrofits where you need utilities inverts, all of that. We might do ahead of time, either saw cut the trenches in, and then actually that lets anything, compact and settle. It gives you some time, and then go in and repave the road in a year or two. So that's kind of our thought process. I don't know if I covered it all. Josh, I don't know if you have anything else, but that's kind of what we have been talking about recently. So,
Yeah.
I'll add another. Oh, sorry, Josh.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just to add on to what Christine was saying, from actually implementing it, capital wise and stuff like that, we're able to go out and kind of put these pavement reduction, curb realignment projects inside the paving operations, which at the end of the day is a lot less expensive, and it's a lot faster instead of going out to bid with all these specialty kind of infiltration trenches. So, in our opinion, Christine and I have been going back and forth. The lowest hanging fruit is jump on the paving schedules and try and figure out where we can really reduce all the pavement. Like she's saying, do the rain garden later and then do the capital stuff, plan that a year, 2, 3 years in advance. Because sometimes that has to go up to, finance and stuff like that to get the appropriate funding. But really, if you're trying to go hard on getting some of these BMPs in, the best way that we found is to tie it into the paving, because it's a lot easier financially and like actually operating it.
Another.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did you? I had my mic on. Did everyone hear me? Is that all right, or was it muffled?
It's okay.
All right, cool. Sorry
We
about
can
that.
hear you better
can hear
now,
you.
but we heard you.
It was
Yeah.
quiet, but we heard
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So pretty much just bury it in the paving. That's the first step, I would say, is the curb realignment. And the easiest way to do it financially and operationally is bury that in the paving. So.
Yeah, because anything more than $10,000 technically is a capital improvement project, and that has to go, like Josh said, through finance and town
Yeah.
meeting. So,
You can use
Yep.
Surge. We're part of
Yep.
like a regional pooling of certain bid items, and sometimes they're effective. But for real specialty stuff like the infiltration trench, you really should go out and get the capital, get it bid, and get someone that really knows what they're doing to install that stuff. So.
Yep.
I wanted to add another place I'm thinking about this being useful for Norwood. That's sort of an ongoing utility maintenance project. Is we're doing a major effort to do water main relining for all of our water mains that are pre-1950 and aren't lined, and they're getting the it's basically, I forget what it's called, but like the rust and stuff inside of them that reduces water pressure. And for that effort, it also involves like digging up the street, and you have to locate all of the utilities. And so that's another really, really useful opportunity for us to look at, like when we're doing that work, what stormwater improvements can be made. And I know a lot of other towns are in that boat of having to do that.